December 6, 1956. British tanks are rolling through Egypt. They've just won a military victory in days. The Suez Canal is theirs. Then the phone rings. It's Washington. Withdraw immediately or we crash your currency tomorrow morning. Britain, the nation that defeated Napoleon, that survived Hitler, that ruled a quarter of the planet, backs down within 72 hours. Not because they lost the battle, they won, but because America threatened to pull the financial plug. That phone call marked the exact moment the British Empire died, not on a battlefield, in a bank. And if you think this is just history, I'm going to show you why America is currently repeating Britain's exact playbook, step by step, mistake by mistake. The timeline is terrifying.
1939. Britain looks unstoppable. 13.7 million square miles of territory. That's bigger than Russia, Canada, and the United States combined. 458 million subjects. Nearly 1 in 4 humans on Earth flew the British flag. But territory was just the visible part. The real power? The pound sterling. Think of it this way. Imagine if every country on Earth needed dollars to buy oil, food, machinery, everything. Oh wait, they do. That was Britain in 1939, except even more dominant. Brazilian coffee, paid in pounds. Australian wool, pounds. Indian cotton, pounds. Argentinian beef, pounds. The City of London wasn't just a financial center, it was the center, period. British banks financed mines in South Africa, railroads across Argentina, factories in India, ports in Australia. The sun never set on British investments. Here's the key. Because everyone needed pounds, Britain could borrow money at rates lower than anyone else. It's like having a credit card with a 0.1% interest rate while everyone else pays 10%. You can finance anything. Aircraft carriers? No problem. Colonial administration? Easy. Global military bases? Put it on the card. And behind it all was the gold standard. Walk into any bank, hand over paper pounds, walk out with actual gold. The pound wasn't a promise, it was as good as metal. The Royal Navy, still the world's largest, made sure everyone played by these rules. But in the basement, something was breaking.
August 1914. The Great War begins. Cost? £35 billion. That doesn't sound that bad, you might think. Britain's entire GDP in 1914 was $2.5 billion. The war cost 14 times Britain's annual economic output. Imagine if the U.S. government today announced, we're going to spend $350 trillion on a war. Oh, and the economy only makes $25 trillion a year. We'll figure it out. That's what Britain did. Where did the money come from? Option 1, taxes. Income tax went from basically 0 to 30%. People were furious, but it wasn't nearly enough. Option 2, war bonds. The government borrowed from its own citizens. Buy bonds, support the troops. Patriotic, but still not enough. Option 3, the fatal choice. Britain borrowed massive sums from the United States. For the first time in centuries, Britain became America's debtor. Read that again. The global financial superpower started owing money to a former colony. The numbers? 1914, national debt equals £650 million. 1918, national debt equals £7.4 billion, an 11-fold explosion in 4 years. But the worst part, Britain liquidated its foreign investments, the golden goose, to buy weapons. Those railroads in Argentina? Sold. Those mines in South Africa? Sold. Those plantation holdings? Sold. Britain was eating its seed corn. And then came the currency disaster. In 1914, Britain left the gold standard to print money. The pound became just paper. In 1925, Winston Churchill, as Chancellor, made a catastrophic decision: return to gold at the old pre-war rate. Problem? The pound was now massively overvalued. British exports became too expensive. Nobody could afford British goods. Unemployment skyrocketed. The economy choked. It's like trying to sell a Honda Civic for $80,000 because that's what it used to cost. Nobody's buying. By 1929, the damage was done. Britain went from the world's largest creditor to a major debtor. The United States quietly became the world's financial center. Most people didn't notice. The British Empire still looked powerful, but financially, hanging by a thread.
If World War I wounded Britain, World War II killed it. Cost another $28 billion. But by now, Britain's economy was already shattered from World War I and the Great Depression. At the war's peak, 55% of Britain's entire GDP went to military spending. 55%. For comparison, the U.S. today spends about 3.5% of GDP on defense. Britain was running a total war economy. Every factory, every farm, every resource pointed at one goal: survival. Food rationed, fuel rationed, clothing rationed, children evacuated from cities, entire industries converted to weapons production. This was not sustainable. By 1941, Britain was about to collapse. Gold reserves almost gone, foreign investments liquidated, ability to pay for American weapons zero. Enter Lend-Lease. America would lend Britain weapons, food, fuel, and supplies. Britain would pay later. Sounds generous, right? Wrong. The U.S. charged interest and demanded concessions. Dismantle your imperial trade preferences, open your empire to American companies, accept American financial oversight, give us military bases. Britain was trading its empire for survival. America was buying global dominance at a bankruptcy sale. By 1945, Britain's national debt hit 250% of GDP. Let me put this in perspective. U.S. debt today, 123% of GDP. We think that's bad. Greece during its crisis, 180% of GDP. Total disaster. Britain in 1945, 250% of GDP. Britain had transformed from the world's largest creditor to the world's largest debtor in exactly 30 years. Everything not nailed down was sold. Art collections auctioned, gold reserves depleted, overseas holdings liquidated, Caribbean islands traded to the U.S. for destroyers. Britain was gutted.
July 1944. The war is still raging. Allied leaders meet at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design the post-war financial system. Britain sends its best, John Maynard Keynes, possibly the greatest economist of the century. Keynes proposes something brilliant, a neutral international currency. Nobody dominates, everyone trades fairly. America sends Harry Dexter White. White has a different idea. The dollar becomes the new reserve currency, backed by gold at $35 per ounce. Take it or leave it. Britain, bankrupt and desperate, has zero leverage. The dollar replaces the pound. This is the most important power transfer of the 20th century. What does reserve currency status actually mean? Everyone needs your money to trade. This creates permanent global demand for your currency. You can run infinite trade deficits. Other countries need to hold your currency, so they'll keep accepting it even if you import way more than you export. You borrow at the lowest rates. Everyone wants to hold your bonds because they're saving in your currency anyway. Your financial sector dominates. New York, London becomes the center of global finance. Trillions flow through your banks. You can weaponize finance. Don't like a country? Cut them off from dollar transactions. Instant economic warfare. For 200 years, Britain had this power. Overnight, it went to America. The pound immediately came under attack. 1949, the first devaluation. Britain tried to maintain the pound's value. Impossible. The economy was shattered, debt was crushing, trade deficits were massive, and the dollar was now king. The pound was overvalued, and everyone knew it. September 1949, Britain devalues by 30%, from $4.03 to $2.80. Great powers don't devalue their currencies, but Britain had no choice. Even this didn't solve the fundamental problem. Britain could no longer afford its empire. Think about the costs.
Military garrisons on 6 continents, the Royal Navy patrolling every ocean, colonial administrations managing 458 million people, infrastructure in dozens of territories, constant military operations against independence movements. Britain's economy was half the size of America's, but it was trying to maintain an even larger global footprint. The math didn't work. Then came Suez. July 26, 1956. Egypt's leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, nationalizes the Suez Canal. This canal is critical. 2/3 of Europe's oil flows through it. Britain owns 44% of the canal company. Prime Minister Anthony Eden is not about to let this stand. Britain, France, and Israel launch a military operation. Within days, they've won. British and French forces occupy the canal zone. Militarily, it's a complete success. And then President Eisenhower picks up the phone. Eisenhower is furious. He wasn't consulted. This looks like old-school colonialism. The optics are terrible during the Cold War. But he doesn't send troops. He doesn't need to. He threatens financial annihilation. The U.S. would dump its massive holdings of British pounds, crashing the currency, cut off oil supplies to Britain, block emergency IMF loans Britain desperately needed. It was financial blackmail, plain and simple. Britain's foreign currency reserves were evaporating by the hour. The pound was in free fall. The ultimatum was clear: withdraw from Suez or we destroy your economy tomorrow. Britain had no choice. Despite winning militarily, they withdrew in complete humiliation. This was the moment the world realized Britain was no longer a superpower. The moment everyone understood British military power meant nothing without American financial approval. Prime Minister Eden resigned in disgrace, his health destroyed. The pound came under renewed attack, and across the empire, independence movements saw the truth. Britain was weak. 1967, second devaluation. Another 14% cut, from $2.80 to $2.40. Prime Minister Harold Wilson went on TV and told the British people, "The pound in your pocket has not been devalued." It was a desperate lie. Everyone knew it. 2 major devaluations in less than 20 years. Why did this keep happening? Britain was stuck in a vicious cycle, consuming more than it produced, running constant trade deficits, spending foreign currency reserves to defend the pound, raising interest rates, choking the economy further, eventually devaluing anyway. When you have the reserve currency, you can get away with this. When you don't, you're just slowly going bankrupt. The 1970s, the sick man of Europe. Stagflation, high inflation plus economic stagnation. Constant strikes paralyzing industry. The energy crisis making everything worse. Manufacturing collapsing. A brain drain as the best talent fled to America. The nation that had been the wealthiest on earth just 50 years earlier was now in managed decline. 1976, the ultimate humiliation. Britain goes to the International Monetary Fund, an organization it helped create, and begs for a bailout. The IMF agrees, with conditions: cut government spending, raise interest rates, implement austerity, accept IMF oversight. The nation that once ruled a quarter of the world was now taking orders from international bureaucrats. Empire liquidation. India, Pakistan, 1947. Malaysia, 1957. Most of Africa, 1960s. Hong Kong, the last major peace, 1997. The official story, moral enlightenment, gracefully granting independence. The reality, Britain was bankrupt. Every colony was a financial drain. The empire had to go because the bills couldn't be paid. Britain's pattern: massive debt from wars, loss of reserve currency status, persistent deficits, currency devaluations, dependence on foreign creditors, loss of political independence, asset liquidation. Now look at America today. Number 1, debt accumulation.
$35 trillion and counting. $1 trillion added every 100 days. Interest payments now exceed defense spending. That's new. That's a crisis signal. Number 2, reserve currency erosion. BRICS nations creating alternative systems. Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil. Central banks diversifying away from dollars. It's slow, but it's happening. Number 3, persistent trade deficits. The U.S. hasn't run a trade surplus since 1975. We import $1 trillion more than we export annually. Only works while dollar is reserve currency. Number 4, currency devaluation. The dollar has lost 86% of its purchasing power since 1971. That's not inflation, that's debasement. Same pattern as the pound, just slower. Number 5, rising debt costs. Interest rates rising, debt growing. The doom loop is beginning. Number 6, growing constraints. Can't afford infrastructure, can't afford health care. Debt ceiling fights every year, political paralysis. The terrifying question, what does America liquidate? Britain sold off overseas investments, gold reserves, military bases to the U.S., colonies. What does the U.S. sell? Military bases worldwide? National parks? The Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Already started. Infrastructure to foreign investors? The critical difference, speed. Britain 30 years from dominant 1945 to IMF bailout in 1976. America started this path in 1971 when Nixon ended gold convertibility. That's 53 years ago. But here's the thing, financial crises move faster now. 1971, information traveled by telegraph. 2024, trillions move in milliseconds. Currency crises that took years now take days. Britain's 30-year collapse could happen to America in 10 to 15 years at current trajectory. What would America's Suez moment look like? Maybe it's Taiwan. The U.S. says it will defend Taiwan. China calls the bluff, threatens to dump U.S. treasuries. America backs down. Maybe it's the Middle East. The U.S. tries to intervene. OPEC threatens to price oil in yuan. America backs down. Maybe it's a debt crisis. The U.S. needs emergency loans. The IMF, now dominated by China, imposes conditions. The exact scenario doesn't matter. What matters is the pattern. Financial power trumps military power, every single time. Britain didn't choose to end its empire. It was forced to by financial reality. The independence movements, the moral arguments, the changing world, all of that mattered, but none of it would have succeeded if Britain could still afford to fight. Money ran out, the empire ended. It's that simple. The British thought it could never happen to them. They'd ruled for 200 years. They had the largest navy, the biggest empire, the global currency. And then it was gone in a generation. America is not immune to economics. We can have the most powerful military in history, but if we can't afford to sustain it, it's irrelevant. We can have nuclear weapons and aircraft carriers, but if we're dependent on Chinese creditors, we don't have independence. We can talk about defending democracy and freedom, but if we're bankrupt, nobody will care what we think. The warning from Britain is clear. Fix the finances now or lose everything later. The choice is ours. The clock is ticking. If this changed how you see America's future, subscribe. I break down the economic forces that actually shape history. Drop a comment. How long before America's Suez moment? 5 years? 10? 20? Or are we already there? Thanks for watching.